The beauty of video games is that even in the most linear, story-driven titles, no two players will ever have the exact same experience. Sure, they'll usually all encounter the same beats and set pieces, but everyone has their own individual ways of playing and their own idiosyncrasies when it comes to how they interact with the systems developers have created. Sometimes this results in simple, subtle changes, like the decision to invert your controls, which, by the way, is absolutely the right thing to do not at me, but sometimes a little tweak can result in a radically different experience and, even more occasionally, one that's better than what the developers have programmed in by default. These games are still amazing no matter how they're played, but they can be made even better by changing a couple of options here and there. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 simple tweaks that make your favourite video games even better. Number 10, switch the language to Russian, Metro Exodus. While they've always been a touch rough around the edges, the three Metro games have told pretty compelling post-apocalyptic stories, and the latest release is easily the most ambitious yet. Over tens of hours, you venture on a journey into the wastes of Russia, furthering the, at times, genuinely emotional story, while taking in the lore of the world along the way. This story is made all the more immersive and compelling, however, if you switch the language of the voice actors to Russian. It's not that the English dub is bad, although in the earlier titles it absolutely is.
Go away! Leave me alone!
It's just the script sounds way better when it's spoken in this other language. Not only does it increase immersion, as it always sounds a touch strange that these characters speak with thick, broad accents, but it also masks some of the weaker scripting elements. The same tweak can be used on the recently released Sekiro as well, though that at least positions the native Japanese dub as the default option. Number 9, use first-person mode, The Evil Within 2. Now, I should preface this entry by saying that no matter how you choose to play The Evil Within 2, you're going to have a bloody good time. That said, there is no denying that the first-person view mode, which the devs patched in after launch, radically changes the experience. Immediately, the jump to the perspective of hero Sebastian makes the game far scarier. Not only does it directly put you in the shoes of the character, but the way it limits your view inherently creates more mystery in the sandboxes. Before, you could clearly see what was waiting around most corners, but now you only know whether or not a gang of monsters is hanging out once you physically step around to see for yourself. It helps that the combat mechanics remain just as strong with the shift in perspective as well, and it makes it the perfect game to play if you love the new viewpoint in Resident Evil 7 and are craving a similar experience. Number 8, Hardcore Mode, Fallout New Vegas. For as long as I'll live, I'll always champion the Hardcore Mode in Fallout New Vegas as being the only way to play the game. Even though the developers actually make it clear in the menu that the option won't be the preferred way to play it for everyone, it makes the experience overall so much richer that you absolutely should ignore that and then go right ahead and choose it before starting a new game. Basically, it adds a whole host of survival elements to the RPG that are balanced enough to add a hint of realism to the title without going totally overboard like Fallout 4's punishing survivalist difficulty. Here, you'll have to balance hunger, thirst, and sleep meters as standard, which actually encourages scavenging. In the base game, you can pretty much ignore a lot of the fluff in the world, to the point where even the slight health benefits that come from drinks and food are better off ignored. Hardcore not only makes these items more essential, but makes juggling your inventory that bit more stressful, as you need to weigh up these essential resources with guns and armor. If you always wanted a bit more depth to Fallout's gameplay, then this is what you've been waiting for. Number 7, disable emotion controls, ARMS. Though it might not be as well known as some of the other entries on this list, ARMS is a blistering fighting game for the Switch, where up to 4 players duke it out and knock each other senseless with their Inspector Gadget-style fists. It's a whole load of fun, but you might have a pretty terrible first impression if you've only been playing with the motion controls. As with any game on the system, using these controls isn't terrible, but it's not the ideal way to play ARMS. At best, it's cool to be in direct control of the finishing blow, but at worst, it makes the game kind of feel a bit like Wii Sports boxing. Fortunately, you can switch this function off entirely and just play it with the regular controls, either by going into the menu to disable the feature or playing it in handheld mode. Number 6, remove the enemies, Soma. Soma has one of the best video game stories of the generation so far. It's just a bit of a shame about the gameplay. When crafting the title, it seems as though developers' frictional games struggle to balance the almost walking simulator-esque narrative with the kind of horror gameplay that made their last project, Amnesia, such a smash hit. Sneaking your way around enemies and engaging in chase sequences wasn't terrible by any means, but getting stuck in a gameplay segment could suck out all of the tension from the story and ruin the pacing. Soma excels in its storytelling, but by including these segments, it occasionally felt like the devs didn't have enough faith to lean entirely on that element, so threw in some stealth action for good measure. Fortunately, this was later acknowledged, and Frictional patched in a safe mode that stops enemies being able to kill you, so players can just enjoy the story at their own leisure. Number 5, turn off the HUD, The Witcher 3 and other RPGs. You can kind of apply this entry to a whole host of RPGs, but if there's one game which seems entirely built around the idea, it's The Witcher 3. Like all big games of its ilk, CD Projekt Red's trilogy capper ushers players from one objective to the next via a waypoint on the map, which has the same result that it always does. Gamers end up mindlessly following the arrow on the screen rather than taking in the gorgeous environment the devs have created. While a lot of releases would benefit from players actually, looking at the world rather than the map, The Witcher 3's quests encourage players to find their own way to objectives. Whether it's the detailed breakdown of directions and goals you're given by NPCs, or the signage littering the open world, actually finishing quests becomes way more rewarding when you switch off the waypoint. And it seems that a lot of fans share the sentiment. The world of The Witcher is so rich and its quest design so finely tuned that it would be a shame to miss out on that just because the minimap was on by default. Number 4, play without listen mode, The Last of Us. Though The Last of Us's combat gets a lot of crap for being pretty standard third-person stealth action fare, it should not be underestimated. Though the story is fundamentally what made the title so special, its scrappy, violent gunfights with both the infected and human bandits are still incredibly intense, and they're made even better if you refrain from using the listen mode. This feature essentially awards the player with a detective or eagle vision that most third-person releases of the time adopted, allowing you to see enemies through walls and plan your route accordingly. If you go through the game without using this feature though, the gameplay is so much more intense. Not only do you have to rely on your actual hearing to pinpoint where enemies are, but it creates a scrappy push and pull with combat that the game seems entirely built around. You'll no doubt make a mistake and end up in a fight that you didn't mean to start, but using your initiative to solve that problem and then get back on track feels right at home with the kind of game that The Last of Us is. Hell, listen mode is turned off by default on the higher difficulties, which perhaps tells you everything you need to know. Number 3, change the aiming settings for smoother combat, Red Dead Redemption 2. Nailed it. Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the best games of the generation so far, but while it has incredible attention to detail in the world and an incredible story, Rockstar's long-standing issue with animation priority means that actually playing the game is a bit more sluggish than other AAA releases. For the most part, that methodical pace is intentional, but in some areas, such as the gunplay and the aiming, it absolutely is not. Fortunately, fans discovered pretty quickly that there is a way to make the shooting in particular far smoother and more responsive, simply by tinkering with a few of the in-game options. You can find plenty of easy guides online, but essentially all you have to do is jump into the menu and lower the aim/look acceleration, as well as the aim assist options and the look sensitivity, and combat then becomes far more accurate. Number 2, turn off the opportunity hints, Hitman. The Hitman series is all about experimentation. All of the games, but the 2 most recent installments in particular, are best enjoyed when you're forced to feel out a level's layout, identify your target, and then come up with your own unique way of taking them out and slipping away as if you were never even there. While you can still do exactly that in the latest games, the generous hint system, waypoints, and item highlights kind of remove the potential for those aha moments of ingenuity. There's a lot of options here that should be turned off for the full Hitman experience then, but opportunities which can be enabled that funnel you down specific pre-planned routes for taking out a target should be your first point of call. They're still fun to pull off, but they inherently remove some of the mystery and ingenuity required to make the most of the gameplay, as it turns the game into little more than following a specific checklist without all that much input from the player. Number 1, play as Kris, Resident Evil Remake. The remake of the original Resident Evil provides one of the greatest survival horror experiences of all time, but you can only get the full experience when you're playing as Kris. Sure, Jill is arguably more iconic, and her story with Barry, as well as her ability to hold more items and access a grenade launcher, makes her fun to play. But Kris's skill set maximizes the gameplay loop that the entire title is built around. That's because Jill is essentially the game's easy mode, and includes a bunch of differences that undermine a lot of the title's challenge. That doesn't just manifest in making puzzles easier and giving players access to better gear earlier, but in the moment-to-moment gameplay as well. With a limited inventory as Kris, you're forced to play the resource game way more, really analysing your every move and packing equipment accordingly. Likewise, traversing the mansion is not only more difficult because you might not have enough space to carry the items you need to progress, but because there's fewer rooms made available to you from the get-go, and you need to find keys for areas that Jill could otherwise lockpick her way into. Jill is potentially the funner option and is personally the one I've played the most, but to get the most out of Resi systems, Kris should be the one you pick. So that's our list. I want to know down in the comments below what you think of these little tweaks. Have you used any of them, and did it improve your enjoyment overall? Either way though, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.